Okay, now let's talk about channel and spill based paint. And these are basically techniques for painting out light. All right, so in this shot example, it's things like this where we have light spilling onto my hand, onto this controller, my hand over here, or in this shot where we have all this light from the Houdini light. So because light is most of the time just increasing the pixel values of our image, right? We know that light is this additive thing that makes things brighter. So because that's usually all it is, we can often get away with certain mathematical algorithms or tricks to just remove the color and luminance from the light. It'd be different if we're talking about painting out the Nuke logo or the Houdini light itself, like this thing right here. That's an actual object. So if we were going to paint these two things out, we would probably want to use techniques that we've already been talking about throughout this course. But when it comes to actual light and spill itself, there are many different ways we can kind of isolate that and remove it. So just to go back to this shot for an example, I know we haven't talked about despill much and it's going to be a bigger topic in the next course, but despill algorithms are basically just mathematical expressions that we apply to our footage to remove a certain color, usually green or blue, and keep the luminance. So if we look at this example, this would be an example of what a despill algorithm would do. We're getting rid of all that green on the screen and all the spill from it, but we're still keeping the brightness. All right, so if we were doing a keying shot, this is a good result for that. Depending on what we put on the screen, if we put something colored on the screen, we'd probably wanna change the despill. Like for example, if we go into this shot, we can actually see I took the background, and let's switch it to the color bars. So I took the background and I added it into the spilled area over here. So here's our spilled light, and then I multiplied the background into it, giving us this result. It's a little strong, but you get the idea. Now the light from the background is shining through and replacing all that spill. But what's cool about this is if we take the actual despill algorithm right here, which I've just put into this expression here, this is one type of despill algorithm. And it's basically just saying if the green pixel is brighter than the average of the red and blue, then replace it with the average of the red and blue. And if it's darker, then just keep the green channel the same. So it's targeting specifically bright green values. But before we add back the luminance, which gives us this, because this technique removes some of the brightness, you can actually see it kind of paints out some of that light, right? This literally looks like it's removing it. There's a little bit of light in here, but for the most part, it looks like it's painting it out, especially on the phone over here. It's doing a really good job of getting rid of that light overall. So if you were doing a shot where the client or you just wanted to remove light entirely, if you're removing light, you actually would want the luminance to come down. You would want to remove the color and the luminance. So a despill expression, when extracted out like this, can be a really good paint out technique. And you don't have to write this expression every time. Like I said, there's multiple type of despill algorithms. So we can just use despill tools for this technique. So the most common and my favorite despill tools are AP Despill. This is a more new despill tool that's really popular and good. And then the classic one that everybody knows, I think it's over a decade old now, is Despill Madness. And if you go into this node, you can see it just has a bunch of little despill expressions in here. Okay, so these are the tools we'll use. And in this shot, this is where I want to use it. Let's say the client said, we want to remove this Houdini light entirely from the shot. So that means if this light didn't exist in this shot, all of this orange light would need to be painted out as well. We're gonna ignore these reflections for right now because that's not gonna work with our technique. But if you remember in the actual shot, we did paint out this light because we replaced it with the Nuke light. So in this shot, we did paint out the Houdini light as well, but I kept the actual lighting. I just changed the color of it because I was adding this light in here. So removing this light entirely and all this lighting is gonna be a little bit of a different process. I've already removed the light for you. We'll show how I did this in the next lesson. But now let's get rid of the light itself using the Despill technique. So I'm gonna create a patch. I'm gonna go off to the side. You could probably do this directly on your footage like this, but like I've said, to be safe, I often just like to create a patch. And we're only working on one frame right now, so we don't need to worry about tracking or anything like that. These tools have red, green, and blue defaulted in them. You can see the Despill Madness also Despill, oh, I guess the Despill Madness only has green and blue, so I guess we're gonna need to use AP Despill for this one. There are some tricks we could actually do to use Despill Madness. If we like hue shifted this to green or blue first, that might work. But because this node has red in here, we can try that. And you can see what it's doing by default. It's by default doing what Despill tools do. They keep the luminance the same. All right, so it's getting rid of that red and it's trying to make it a neutral color. It's kind of green. The more important thing that it's doing that we want to adjust is it's keeping the luminance relatively the same. So we want to change that. So usually what I do when I'm trying to do this technique is I actually just play with the sliders until I get a result I want. So the first one is the hue offset. I want to try and get it to the most neutral color that I can, because like I said, it was kind of green and we want it to be a neutral color, or at least a color that would make sense with this light over here. So I'll say something like this is good for the color. And I'm gonna mess with the tolerance a little bit to see if we can help with the color a little bit as well too. Okay, I think I'm gonna come back to that, but for now, something in here looks decent. We're gonna also wanna mask this off because it's affecting our whole image and we only want this to affect where this light is. Now the key thing we're gonna wanna affect is this respill color here. So this is what's adding that luminance back. And right now it's set to white, which would do similar to what we did up here. But what we wanna do is reduce the luminance until the light is gone. And sometimes this isn't even possible, by the way. I just happen to know this shot is possible because I was messing with it, obviously, before filming this video. So sometimes this technique won't work that well and you'll have to resort to either color corrections or some of the other paint techniques that we've shown. This can be really tricky, but sometimes it just works like magic. So let's keep going. Let's reduce the respill color. And as you can see what it's doing, it's reducing that luminance. And I'm really just looking over here right now because this is where it's doing a really good job. And you can see we're getting a really nice result. I'm gonna keep messing with these values because the color is looking a little bit too green and blue. Okay, cool. I think something like that looks pretty good. Now we've removed the color and the luminance from this light. You can see it's even getting rid of it down here on the ground. Now it's also making this pillow color go away. So we'll need to stencil that out because the pillow is orange. So we'll do that in a second. So let's mask this and let's just look at our original plate. And let's say we only want it basically in these areas. I'll do something like this. Let's merge it over. And now I'm gonna also feather it. And this is gonna actually resemble how light actually works because the roto has a nice exponential fall off and light fall off is exponential. The roto feather's not perfectly exponential, but it does a pretty good job of resembling light. Okay, and that's doing a pretty good job. You can see, especially right here, it just completely paints out that light. Now we are getting some other issues, like now the Nuke logo is a little green. There's actually some green tint in here that I'd continue to want to remove. It's doing a really good job of removing the light, but because we had an orange light, even though we've removed it and our wall is staying the right color, because we had this orange light often casts a cool shadow. So we have this blue kind of look to everything. And we'll talk more about light and how it kind of works in that regard in the integration course. But you can see what I mean. It's like kind of blue and weird looking over here. So the shot definitely does need a little bit more work. We can actually maybe try putting another Despill node down and setting it to blue. And that definitely helps a little bit. Mess with these sliders. We could even mess with the mix a little bit if we wanted. I do think that's helping. We probably want to match this wall color over here, which is pretty neutral colored. And then we'd also want to stencil out that pillow, which I've already done over here. So I'm just going to grab that in. And so, yeah, we need to do a little bit more work on this. But now when we view the painted out shot, we get this. And that's a pretty good start. And if we had to paint out these lights with the traditional techniques that I've been showing you so far, gonna be a pain. Painting out light, especially with like a roto paint, can be really annoying. Okay, so as you can see, very powerful technique. I actually used it like 2 weeks ago. I was doing a blue screen shot at work and they had some red tracking markers and they were completely out of focus. So I just put this same node down, set it to red and adjusted the parameters a little bit and completely painted out the tracking markers using this technique. Now, it only really worked because the tracking markers were out of focus. If the tracking markers looked like this, that obviously isn't going to work, right? No despill or color correction is going to remove these tracking markers. They exist in all the channels and they're really distinct. That's why these techniques really only work for light, okay? Not like actual objects. And speaking of something existing in all the channels, let's talk about the last technique, and that is channel-based paint. So like I just said, usually when we want to paint something out like an object, it exists in all of the RGB channels, right? But when we're dealing with something like light, or spill and just colors in general, occasionally you will have a clean frame in one of the channels. So in this shot, I want to get rid of this red light here. So I want to paint this out, and that also means painting out the flare that it's causing and the reflection here. So sometimes when I need to paint out light, what I'll do is I'll simply just look through the red and green channels to see what I have. And what I'm looking for is if the thing I want to remove does not exist in one of the other channels. So let's focus just on this area for now. This is what we want to remove. If I view the red channel, we can obviously see that red light there. But if I look at the green channel and the blue channel, that red light does not exist. So we basically have a clean frame in one of the other color channels. Okay, so this technique can be a little abstract, but that's the kind of basis for it. We have a clean frame in one of the color channels. So if we want to paint out that red light, let's put a shuffle node down and let's take one of our clean frames. Right now, nothing's happening. We know we can use the green channel or the blue channel because the red light doesn't exist in either of those channels. I'll just use the green channel. And what we want to do is put the green channel in the red channel. So this is what we'll get. I'm looking at the red channel now. I'm going to put the green channel in the red channel. So that got rid of it in the red channel now. And you can see it's gone. But now our whole image is affected, which makes sense because if I put the green channel, I'm looking at the red channel. If I put the green channel in there, well, now the whole red channel is a completely different intensity. Remember, our color channels are just individual intensities per channel. And when we combine those channels at different intensities, that's how we get color per pixel. So all we have to do is put a grade node down and adjust the intensity in that one channel. So let me just draw a mask around the area that I want to adjust, just over here. Let's feather it a little bit. I like to make my feather pretty wide because that light actually grows a little bit if we brighten our footage, something like that. And actually we don't need to plug in the mask to the grade node. We can just, since we're doing a patch off to the side, we can just mask our result like this and merge it over like that. Okay, so before affecting the grade node, this is what we're getting. So what we want to do, we know our green channel and blue channel are fine, so we don't need to do any adjustment in there. All of the issue is in the red channel. So viewing our final, if we drop down our individual RGB adjustments, we can just adjust the intensity of the red channel until it goes away. Okay, something like this. And now we've painted out that light. Pretty cool. And we can try and do the same thing for this flare and see if it works. You might have to do a different patch, but let's just go ahead and try it on the same patch. Let's just do a circle. Okay, that seems to be doing a pretty good job. And let's just feather it out. Something like that. Let's not do it here. That seems to be doing a really good job. So just with this one technique, we got rid of the red reflection and the red flare. And even the red around the little dot here. We still have to remove the dot, and we'll do that in a second, but this did a lot of the heavy lifting for us. Both these techniques are really heavy hitters, okay? They do a lot of what would be pretty manual work really quickly. You're basically just color correcting light rather than having to do frame hold patches and paint it out. So now we want to paint this thing out, and we obviously can't use either of these techniques to remove this. It is light, but it's also a hole. So we're gonna need to use traditional techniques to paint this out. And I want you to do this, okay? So I've shown you plenty of techniques by now. I want you to come in here and do this whatever way you see fit. The only thing is I'll mention is there is a procedural way to paint this out. And that's the technique that I'm gonna show you in a second, okay? So now's your chance, pause the video. And okay, now it's my turn.